鬼岛之音
Ghost Island Media。
大家好，我是 Z 色派对的制作人 Ting。 我们去年2023年播出了一集跟台湾澳洲混血创作歌手 Jaguar Jonze 的访谈，聊 Jaguar Jonze 的音乐创作路程，他带动澳洲音乐产业界的 Me Too 倡议，以及他生在澳洲及台湾之间的国籍法的困境。那时候我们用中文重述了 Jaguar 跟主持人的精彩对谈，大受好评。而今天我们要来还原原文的英文访谈。想重新听中文版的听众可以去听 Z 色派对第48集，点燃澳洲音乐产业 Me Too 的火焰。祝你们收听愉快。
Z 色派对是一个让大家脱掉内衣轻松 hang out 的地方，
来聊聊一些真金老母真金的事情。大家好，我是 Zukim AKA Z 教授。
大家好，我是经纪律师 AKA Zoe 大麻律师。欢迎来参加我们的 Green Party Z 色派对。
And my mum usually 9 o'clock sleep, right? I came home at 2 a.m. and her light in the bedroom was still on and the bedroom door was still open and she's sitting in her bed staring at me and she was like, I hated that show. You are out of pitch. You're not talented. You'll never make it. You wasted my time. Don't do this to yourself. Don't be a musician.
We have a absolutely special guest in the house today. And I'm going to have her introduce herself because she has amazing voice and amazing smile. I'm sorry you cannot see it right now, but follow her page and then just check out her videos. It's amazing. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. 对不起，我麻烦大家。
不会 It's a good practice. It's a good practice.
Do I do it in English?
Yeah, sure.
I guess I could do a bit. 你好，我是 Jaguar Jonze， 我从澳洲来了。我是歌手，and I'm here to chat with Zoe and Zukim today, and I'm super excited. 我很高兴认识你们。Okay, that's it.
Chinese 101起来。
That's cute, no.
That's all my Chinese.
Okay, so before we start, do you prefer to be called Dina or Jaguar?
Jaguar.
如果你是我的妈妈，你会叫我 Dina.
Okay. Then we will call you Jaguar.
Yeah.
Okay.
你生气我 then you can call me Dina. Or like Dina Lynch, but 大家叫我 Jaguar.
Okay. So if you're listening, you might be a little bit confused. How come she speaks a little bit Chinese? So her mom is from Taiwan and her dad is from Australia, right?
对。
But she was born in Japan,
对。
but grew up in Australia.
对。
Okay, so there's a very international background. And you have other two names, Spectator Jones and Dusky Jones.
Yeah, Dusky 是我的照片。
Oh,
yeah.
she's also a photographer.
Yeah, and Spectator 是我的画画的。
She's also an artist.
Yeah.
Wow. Too much talent in the house. Okay, so she's a singer, songwriter, she's an artist, and also a photographer. But today she's here mainly for her one very special identity as a survivor. Okay, so today's show will be, we'll touch on some difficult topics. So it might be a little bit difficult, it might be a little bit emotional. So if it's a little bit too much for you, feel free to pause a little bit, walk away, get a cup of water. But I would invite all of our listeners to stay with us because this is a very important topic. And I think, to confront this topic head on is a very important way to, make a world a better place. I guess we'll have to start with a little bit of the background of what happened.
Well, that's hard to narrow down because I think as women and also as women of color, we go through more than one event, I think, that is a collection of all our injustices that we have to go through. But I guess in the term of what event started my journey as an advocate was about 3, nearly 4 years ago. I was sexually assaulted by 2 men in the industry. It was 2 music producers. I'm currently going through a court case with them still, like 4 years on. And it's been a very long and, I guess, traumatic process. But I think, you know, even though that's not the only event I have gone through, I think that was the final straw in my kind of anger overcoming me and deciding to fight for my own justice, speak up and claim back my power. So I think that would be the main starting point that people always refer to, because after that point, I started speaking out on social media and people started finding me as the safe space to tell their own stories. And I used that, the trust that survivors put with me, I used that power to unite our voices together and do something about it outside of the justice system and the leadership that we're meant to trust. So, yeah, I think that it's been like over, you know, 4 years. Yeah.
Wow, that is a very long time. You could get a college degree or even a PhD degree in 4 years.
Yeah. But
so
also the case, like the court process is like torturing, to be honest.
Yeah, it's torturing. I only, like the court hearing happened in November and then we go to trial next year, 2023 now. And when I went through the court hearing, you know, I've been advocating for many years, but I didn't even realize that, like, I was advocating about how messed up the music industry is and the imbalance of power in the music industry was really disturbing for me. But when I went through the court hearing, I realized that I'm just scratching the surface with the music industry. The justice system is very unjust. And that was shocking to me because I was faced with a lot of like manipulation, misogynism, like unfair tactics. The imbalance of power in that room was just disgusting. And it was a lot for me to confront. And I'm an adult and there are so many children that have to go through that process too. And even people who don't speak English as their first language having to go through that court system. I was just in shock at how far behind the justice system is and it needs to catch up with society.
Talking about the justice system, could you kind of contextualize, you know, this entire thing for...
Okay, so after the sexual assault happened, I went to the police about 2 or 3 months after it had happened. I went to the police and filed a report. And that was because I tried to talk with these 2 men and get accountability and an apology from them. And they decided to double down and put the blame on me, saying, if you didn't want it to happen, you should have gone home. Or like, you know, those kind of like flipping the tactics. They also knew that, like, because I'm quite open and transparent as a musician, I think it's important to be vulnerable and transparent. And so one of the perpetrators also said, like, you know, you should understand my actions as a, like, you know, a person who had gone through child abuse and survived that. You should understand that my actions also come from that with a very, like, turbulent childhood. Just, you know, excusing behavior in just really twisted ways. And I realized that I wasn't going to get the accountability that I deserved from the 2 men. So I reported it to the police. Then I sat around expecting the justice system to do its job. Nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. For over 2 years, nothing happened. So that's when I realized that nothing was going to happen when I do things in the formal way. And I started hearing about many stories, not just of my one particular one. I was hearing many stories about a photographer who I also had been in contact with. I heard many women being hurt by this particular photographer in the music industry. So I started posting about, I can't post about anything directly. So in Australia, what it does is it's really silencing. And also we have another law in Australia. It's called the gag law. Gag, like, you know, like tape over your mouth, that kind of thing.
Not to speak.
Yeah, it's starting to change in certain states. But in the past, even if the perpetrator was convicted, as in for the crime, put in jail and, you know, gone through the court system and being told that they are now being convicted guilty of that crime, the victim is not allowed to talk about it.
Ever?
It protects...
Ever? Or like it's like
ever. So it protects the perpetrator.
Well, but can like a news media cover the story
but
or something
even
like
then,
that?
it'll be anonymous.
Oh, wow. But why?
Well,
because it's to protect
the victim?
No, it's to protect the perpetrator. So the victim can't talk about their story.
Ever?
This is starting to change.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of campaigning about this law. It's called the gag law. So it just is this like really, it creates this environment where as a survivor, as a victim, you know, when the crime happened to you, the injustice already happened to you, your voice and your body was already taken away from you. And then society continues that pattern of taking away your voice and your autonomy away from you.
Scary.
It is so scary.
So were you aware of the gag law
Yes.
before this happened?
Yeah, so I think the gag laws are now starting to change. So I think where I live, I'm still going through the court case, so the gag law doesn't apply to me.
I see.
But for my advocacy for 4 years, I never said, like I said what happened to me, but I didn't say who.
Oh, okay.
Like who.
So even to this day, people
Even
do not know.
to this day, I haven't said it. Only recently in July last year, the media
Figured out?
the media was able to report on it because it was said in the public court system.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and so it's still not out of my mouth, so I didn't do anything wrong.
Wow.
I think now that the media has published it, I can say, but I have to, like even when the media says it, they have to say alleged. They can't say, you know, that sort of thing. But for years when I was advocating, you know, people are like, how does it feel to have a voice and to be at the front of the Me Too movement, and you're the face of the Me Too movement in the Australian music industry? How does it feel to have your voice back? And I just say, do I have my voice back?
No, you didn't.
Because I haven't been able to say anything. Everything I've done up until this point in the Me Too movement has been strategic because that's just this case that happened to me. That's just one of them. But what ended up happening was I did a social media post. I started like a series of Post-it notes where I just published anonymous quotes from victims.
So people sent it to you.
So I did a Post-it note saying like, because I was just an emerging artist, I didn't have a big platform. I don't have a lot of power or privilege. And I put out this Post-it note saying like, hey, if you need a safe space and for you to know that you're not alone, reach out to me. I was expecting like 2 or 3 people to reach out to me. It turned into 500 people.
Wow.
500 people who were affected by people in the music industry.
Only in the music industry?
Only in the music industry. Yeah. Or like people who were affected by people working in the music industry. Yeah.
So would you say the music industry itself is particularly bad or it's just like generally like that in Australia?
No, I mean, I can't speak for other industries, but I'm sure that it happens in every industry. But the music industry is like the wild, wild west.
And why is that?
You know, because it's completely unregulated.
Okay.
And like government intervention hasn't happened too often. So accountability in like within the organizations is not very strong, say, compared to other sectors. So even just like human resource departments, if you go and report, nothing happens, or they use that information against you and straight away fire you or make you redundant or bully you.
There's no law protecting.
It is illegal, but because there's no accountability, nothing happens.
What's like a labor union, something like that?
There is a union, but it's not very strong in the contemporary music industry. It's stronger in the classical music industry.
I see.
Yeah. So, and because like power has gone so unchecked, it means that a very few people have control over a lot in the music industry. It's quite similar to a lot of, I guess kind of
and those in power are
totalitarian
usually
kind of regimes. Like you don't want to upset the handful of people, one or two or three people
or
that have a lot of power.
Easily cancel you in all
so
kinds of
it's very
platforms.
similar to the Weinstein case, right?
It is really similar.
Yeah, he is and was so powerful.
Yeah. So it was the same thing. I started collecting these stories and seeing what I can do with each of these stories. And I just put together, I know all the information, but I can't put that information in the public because that puts me at risk for being sued. So I just started publishing anonymous quotes. And I think people, in the music industry got the idea and a lot of pressure started to be built and a lot of people started understanding who those quotes were talking about. And then people were starting to point the finger at like, what are you going to do about this? With the photographer, he came out 3 days later and said, I'm an abuser. These quotes that have been published, I take accountability. I'm going to go to therapy. Just wrote a huge, letter owning up to his really...
That is really rare.
It is really rare.
That doesn't happen.
It is really rare. Yeah.
But just one person.
This is just one person.
Okay.
But it started this domino effect. So if we talk about Harvey Weinstein, one of the things that followed after that, after building a lot of this like pressure, and I just kept applying this pressure. And in every public platform I was given, I just spoke about how messed up this is, that, the people who get paid the most in this industry are benefiting and like off the corruption and aren't being responsible with the power that they've been given. And I just kept saying that. It's like, why am I doing the job for the people who are meant to look after us? Someone who's at the bottom, who doesn't have a sustainable career, and I'm using my voice to just like be like, what is going on? So I just kept going, and soon like the kind of dominoes started falling. People started getting angry and like starting to like really question why we've just allowed this to happen for so long. And similar to the Harvey Weinstein case, like the CEO of Sony Australia, he was let go, and he was the CEO for 34 years.
What? So he was let go because of his own conduct of sexual...
No, so I mean, what we have to say is that, so I was part of I was within this media investigation surrounding his leadership as a Sony CEO. Like, he is not alleged to have committed any sexual assault and whatnot, but what is talked about is his leadership infrastructure, his way of bullying and harassment within the company, and I guess how things were reported to him and how that information, he was complicit. He was complicit in the downfall of and the hurt of so many people under his corporation and who worked for him.
So the pressure came from, like, was it internal pressure from Sony, or is it because of the public was outraged?
The public. Okay. It's just these continuous anonymous quote that just kept going. That a lot of these companies, so it wasn't just him. Most of the top of the people at Sony were let go, and the same with all the other major labels.
I see.
And I just
so that happened after you started speaking out 2 years after the.
Yeah, this is over years, years and years. I just kept going. And even if I did get information, I would go straight to some of these companies and go, I have 10 girls who have come to me about this one person and you've done absolutely nothing about it. And I'm asking you, what are you going to do about it? So I'll just like set meetings and just go into these rooms.
You're just like, I'm tired of this.
You're like the HR.
You're like an HR. They should pay you.
Same with,
right? They should pay you.
Same. Oh, well, yeah, that's why I was mad, because like I am sacrificing my time, my energy. I'm already trying to survive as a musician. I'm also trying to go through my own trauma. And here I am doing the jobs for all these people who make really good money.
I know.
From artists who make no money.
Yeah. That's fucked up.
It's fucked up.
It is very fucked up. So you were going through your own trauma, and then you were trying to do something for other people, right? You're trying to confront these assholes, right? And then the court is like ignoring
a super
you.
Injustice system.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because for a lot of people who have gone through what you've gone through may not have the power to do what you do, but they also have the trauma. You know, when people talk about their experience of sexual violence, other people, usually the first question is, what took you so long to say anything, right? If you say immediately, they were like, I don't know, they always have something to say about, victim of sexual violence. So did you know something was happening, something wrong was happening at the moment, or did you come to realize it afterwards?
Yeah, I mean, I even said to you, it took me 3 months to go to the police. So why didn't I go to the police straight away? It's the same question.
Yeah.
And I think the way I would like to, it's kind of like two questions there, right? Like one for the survivors and the victims, and one for the people who don't understand the process of trauma. And I think I'll go to the one about making people understand better. We need to be more trauma informed in society and dismantle a lot of the shame and taboo that allows this kind of culture to happen in the first place, especially as, you know, as Asians, as women of color. I think we're socialized, like we're raised to keep quiet, to not disturb, to not make a fuss, to always try to de-escalate the situation, to make things as friendly and easy as possible. That's how we're raised, especially because in the Asian culture, we're more based on community. So it's not about you or me.
Community.
It's about the community. And what's best for the community is to keep your mouth shut. You know, it's kind of that theme that gets conditioned into us since we're little. So there's that. I think, you know, why does it take so long to speak up? Because we know we're taught to not disrupt society, that there'll be a lot of oppression and shame and ostracizing if you speak up, and, you know, kind of like the water is calm and you want to throw rocks at it, like they don't want that to happen. So better to go with the waves. So I think the survivor has to go through this process of dismantling the society's programming as well. And then, of course, like, firstly, you're also having to process your own trauma. That takes time, because like when something like that happens to you, someone has stepped over your boundaries and taken your body without permission, decided to take from you like your body. And there's a lot that goes on with your brain when that happens. And I think society doesn't really understand that when we go through something like that, people expect that we kick and we scream and we make noise, or we run away. But there's a third one as well, and we see it in the wild, and that's we freeze and play dead.
Exactly.
And because we don't understand that on like a society level, we start to blame ourselves when we react to trauma and like use a survival mechanism that we start to go through straight away in that moment. So for me, I freezed and played dead, which means that I said no many times over. And when that stopped working, I just like limp, you know, like I just started playing dead. And that's because we're taught to, like, if we start fighting,
we might get hurt.
We might get hurt even more.
Yeah.
So I want to give a name to what Jaguar just talked about. we are so conditioned to believe that there's a fight or flight, right? It's like flight or fight. So we either fight back or we run away.
Yeah.
But exactly what you're talking about, there is a third option. You freeze, right?
Yeah.
Either out of your own choice. I'll just freeze, I'll just play dead because it's safer for me. Or your brain just couldn't function. Your brain just couldn't process what's going on.
Totally.
So they really just freeze.
Yeah.
It's like a computer freezes.
Yeah.
And there's actually a fourth option. It's called just to keep the,
totally.
alliteration goes on. It's F. So the last one is called fawn, FAWN.
Yeah.
That means to try to be nice, right?
Yeah.
Try to give them what they
Yes.
want.
Yeah.
And even act like you want it because you think that, okay, probably if I act like I enjoy it, it'll be over soon and something like that. But if that's what you chose to do, or that's what you are left to choose to do, then it's hard to argue that this is a sexual assault. But that is just like a normal behavior. That's a normal reaction. And that goes back to earlier you talk about a term called trauma-informed. I think this is a relatively new concept for maybe a lot of people don't know what that means. To be trauma-informed means to know that there are traumas everywhere. To know that the person standing in front of you acting all normal and healthy may have gone through trauma.
Yeah.
And their reaction to things, maybe because they have gone through trauma.
Yeah.
So if you have not, you may not know why this person is acting this way, right? Or why are the society the way it is. So to be trauma-informed is to be more aware and to know how to deal with trauma.
And I think it gets even more cloudy and complex when we add in a layer of workplace. So, it's easier to then talk about like when someone was confronted by a stranger in an alleyway, why you would take on fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And people can understand that better. But then put in the complexities of like interpersonal relationships that you have with these people and power and privilege and money and your career and your reputation. All of that gets clouded, right? And so what I always speak about is people who are taking advantage of those situations. So Harvey Weinstein, for example, that we kind of touched on. What he was doing was really wrong, but to understand like the depth of what he was doing in those situations is even more sickening, is that he used his power to take advantage of those situations. The two perpetrators who sexually assaulted me, they were two producers that I worked with. And I thought I was in a safe space because they were my colleagues. And then as soon as no one was around, they changed in the way they behaved towards me. So I was safe until there was no one around. And then they wanted what they wanted. But in that moment, I was so scared about what would happen if
you scream.
If I screamed,
Yeah.
if I hurt their ego, if like they were about to ruin my reputation and my career. It's so different now sitting in the place that I am in, and I'm now, further along in my career. But at that time, I was just starting as a musician. And so that's completely different. And I think the main thing I need people to understand is that as you grow, you need to understand the power that you have in each room. It might be different in this room, and then you go outside and go to another room and it's different in another room. But I think a lot of people have a lot of unchecked power, and so they just use that power without even thinking twice about what kind of power they have over the person in front of them.
Yeah, like in Taiwan, we have a law to deal with similar situation. Basically is even that looks like the person is willing to have sexual activities with you, but if the other person has power over you, like in working place or like in school,
a teacher
or like even not a direct supervisor, but could have some influence to fire you or jeopardize your career, then you could, if you have like sexual activities, you can say, okay, I know that look like I'm agree to do that, but actually you use your power or your influence to make me do that.
Yeah.
That's a crime here.
And that's the problem with the music industry is that it's so much more simple when you look at organizations and it's just one structure. But in something like the film industry or the music industry, we're talking about a lot of different like sole traders, like individuals and small businesses that are working, subcontractors, just individuals everywhere. It's not just like one organization
like a lot of
with
like
one HR.
Flexibility, therefore a lot of gray
it's
area.
Just a lot of gray area. And then, you know, because a lot of the success you get in the music industry is about who you know and who you're connected with and who you're working with.
Yeah.
If you know someone is up to wrong, you don't want to jeopardize your entire like...
Because they are holding a lot of power, right?
Yeah.
To decide whether you get the next job.
Yeah.
Or even like his one word could ruin your
exactly
everything you did.
Yeah. So is a problem in the fact that like a lot of people have unchecked power and use that in the wrong way. And on the other side, a lot of people enabled that behavior and didn't speak up when they saw something was wrong. And this went on for so long that it became a culture. So something I did, like we did last year, was I was part of this group that came together and we raised $500,000 to hire independent consultants to review our industry and then interview one-on-one panels and like discussions and surveys. We got 1,400 voices to contribute to this review. And so, you know, in the last few years where I first gained a lot of awareness and momentum, I knew that wasn't enough to change the industry because momentum can easily just die down and everyone's like, whew, glad that's over. I wanted concrete evidence and facts to just slap the industry with like, it's a true problem. It's not just me just saying there is a problem. Now there's facts to back what I'm saying.
After the independent investigator review, so what's the findings? It's like a 80-page document, but the findings were shocking, really saddening, but not surprising. And what that review showed was that most of the time, women were at a disadvantage in the music industry, that people who were First Nation and people of color, you know, disabled, those kind of marginalized communities, LGBTQI+, they were at a lot more of a disadvantage and were more susceptible to harassment, bullying, and abuse in the music industry. It's everything we know, but it was just really displayed. And it also showed that a lot of the times when sexual assaults or bullying or harassment or systemic discrimination occurred, it was showing that imbalance of power and also the fact that when people reported it to their companies or their seniors, they either lost their jobs or nothing happened about it. So all of that was just kind of like laid out. It even showed how often women were made redundant, let go from their jobs when they became pregnant as well. Wow.
So that level of discrimination was happening in the music industry.
Wow, so you raised $500,000 and hire independent reviewers, and this is the result. And just like you said, it's saddening but not surprising. Just telling us everything that we kind of already know. And then earlier you said about unchecked power, and then about how women and all these people of, you know, marginalized groups, you know, some people argue women cannot be marginalized because, you know, we take up half of the world. But that is just
really?
wrong.
Did they actually argue that?
It's like women cannot be minority, right? Because the sheer number
Have they heard of patriarchy? Have they? I don't know.
Because I taught this class, you know, feminism in a college campus. You know, it's just a college and it's a really good college in Taiwan. Mostly they're known for their engineering department. So I knew that they might be a little bit resistant, you know, to learn about feminism. And because I knew the teacher before me, she taught that class, and then she was literally yelled at by students in classroom.
Wow.
They're like, whatever you're talking about is just not real. You're just trying to pick a fight with us. And then they yelled at her. And so that's why when I took the class, and then, the director was like, well, I have to tell you, okay, this happened. So they might be, a little bit resistant. So I was like, okay. So I was preparing myself to teach that class. And, I kind of thought, I think I was wrong. Okay, I thought all these kids, they will understand when I'm talking about feminism, the problem with patriarchy and stuff like that. They were either unaware of all these problems, or they just couldn't comprehend the evidence I present, with them. And the evidence comes from just like news report every day. Like 2 hours before I walk into the classroom, this happened. I was like, oh, this just happened 2 hours ago. Did you all see that? No one saw that because their news feed on their social media contained of different things. And most of them were just unaware, right? Because they were like, oh, we never thought about this. Oh, this is what happened.
Yeah.
And then, but there are just a couple of them were just so resistant. And one of them at the end of that course, final 5 minutes left of the entire semester, he stood up and said, because I was just talking about the pay difference between men and women. And then he literally said, men are getting paid more because we just work harder. Isn't that true?
Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, men just, oh my God. Okay.
He literally said that. Isn't it true that we're getting paid more because we just work harder? And then I was like, okay, why would you have to do that 5 minutes, before the class ends? Right? You could have just said in the first class and we'll just deal with it. So I tried to reason with him. I tried to talk, but then I realized that he really was unaware of what power is. And what does that mean? So I just gave him, I just told him that no one is saying that you weren't working hard. You definitely worked hard to get into this classroom, right? Because this is a good college, So I said, no one is saying that you didn't work hard. What people are saying is, and also I'm not talking about you, okay? Just, I'm not talking about you. I'm just talking about this entire, the whole world.
The society.
Right? And then I said, just one simple explanation is you put in 100% of your time and then you get 150% in reward. And the person next to you put in 100%, of their effort, but only got 80%. Then you have to think about what made the difference, right?
Yeah.
You all work really hard. Okay, I acknowledge that. But you have to think about that. I don't know whether he understood what I'm talking about.
It's also not about input, right? It's like privilege.
Yeah.
So the fact that he's able to attend that class at university, I mean, a lot of us don't even get to that place.
Exactly.
And that's not because it's a reflection of our hard work or our intelligence. It's just opportunity and privilege and access.
Yeah, so how would you explain the idea of power and privilege to someone who just doesn't understand? Like, of 4 years of you doing that, I imagine you must have run into people who just couldn't understand what's going on.
Yeah, I think it takes time because, if we're even talking about how the patriarchy and how power works, it's really effective and has been going on for a really long time. And, deprogramming that takes a long time. I'm not where I am, since I was born. I wasn't as, active and understood all of that until injustice happened to me either. And I think I learned quicker as I started speaking up because the ceilings over your head to shut you down and to, keep you in your place gets harder and stronger and more brutal as you try to speak up more. So then you really realize how the patriarchy works and how white supremacy works as well. I think it's not our responsibility to try to educate this one person who doesn't want to listen, but I think it would take time for them. We're talking about someone a lot of people in our higher generations. Even when I was doing this advocacy work and trying to push this, showing the systemic issue that's in the music industry, I was faced with a lot of ignorance and avoidance and just deflection of blame. And that was coming from women too, because women who actually end up at the top playing a men's game benefit from the corruption as well. Yeah. And I don't want to upset the status quo. So it's hard, right? But I think like it's really hard to make them understand. But I would just try to say, I mean, I don't know what's right or wrong, but I would just try to say that like people need to be, I don't know, is there a way that people can look at what privilege they have? Like, can you list out a questionnaire of like, are you male or female or like what gender?
Yeah, there is actually a questionnaire like that. And I had my student fill out the questionnaire. And one of the questions that confuses them the most is actually the fact that white people in the world just simply have more power than non-white people. And because my students they grew up in Taiwan. They're the privileged group in Taiwan. So they don't understand, how can I not be privileged in this sense? Right? So they're like, white people having more power.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, how do I explain that to you?
Yeah, that one's a hard one. I don't know what it's like in Taiwan as well, like culturally, but there is a fascination with the West.
Yeah,
and
definitely is.
Yeah, a huge fascination with the West. And why is that as well? And I think even just like this, like, it's so hard. Like, you know, when, like, because I am Hunsha, so like I am half white and half Asian. But even when people say like, oh, you're so lucky you have big eyes, but like, you know what I mean?
Okay, so you probably have to, kind of unpack that a little bit. Yeah, what does that mean?
Why am I lucky that I have big eyes? Like,
so people with small eyes, like Asian people with smaller eyes, are still more discriminated against in Australia?
I mean, I am discriminated against a lot in Australia. And that's like, my manager is white and she like hasn't managed an artist like me, a woman of color who's extremely marginalized. I also didn't grow up with the same privilege and access and opportunity as other people did in Australia. It's very complicated, my childhood, because I am in like a marginalized group. I am reminded of that every single day as I try to be a musician. And even today, I was in the newspaper, like nominated as Australian of the Year or something like that.
Wow.
And my manager wrote to me, wow, like you weren't even the token nomination this time, because I always am.
And the token.
Yeah.
Okay, you have to explain, what does that mean? What's the token?
Okay. It's when, I guess, like when you're in a very multicultural society like Australia. Oh, I think it applies for Taiwan too.
Yeah, definitely.
Say you have like a festival lineup. Well, this is something that like your students should try to understand, that there will be the way it's programmed, there will be a favorable programming to program a particular type of artist into a festival. And so that you'll find that the majority, I think generally, if we look at major festivals around the world, we'll find that a lot of the people who take the main stage and are front people are men and white men.
White men.
Yeah. And so it's harder for women to get on the festival bill. And so there's been a push for that as well, to try and make that quota 50-50. But in the beginning, like when a festival doesn't want to have the public get angry at them, there's token spots. So say there's 100 spots for a festival. Maybe 80 of them are white men.
Yeah.
And then maybe there's 5 for First Nations people, 5 for women, 5 for people of color. Yeah. You know what I mean?
2 for LGBTQ.
Yeah, 5
maybe 1
for LGBTQ. 1 for disabled. You know what I mean? And then they're like,
look at us. We are all so diverse, right?
We're so diverse.
We have, check. I have this one black friend. Therefore, I'm all for multiculturalism, right?
Yeah. So when I started my career as a musician, I found everything was hard work. It was quite hard. But I found it like in the beginning of my career was easier than where I am now. Because token spots exist for the emerging when you first start. But then they want to rotate you out. Yeah. They don't want to move you from the beginning spot to the middle to the top. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
They'll give you that
there's
beginning
one spot only for one person.
Yeah.
It's you for 5 years, and then you were just like
and then you're tossed
away.
Out,
yeah.
And then the new token spot is filled. But you don't get to progress like other people do in their careers up the billing, up the festival billing kind of thing. So now that I'm way beyond that emerging block, it's really hard to move on. Because, you know, I even got knocked back from a festival. They're just like, oh, we don't have space because we already have that filled.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think one very easy way to see this is when you look at it like American TV show.
Yeah.
You will see so many white people.
Yeah.
But there will be one black,
yes.
one woman, one
yeah.
brown,
yeah.
and one yellow.
Yeah, yeah.
And you will never see two yellows because that spot is filled,
yeah.
right? The token, we have one token and that's it.
Yeah. And then that system reinforces the imbalance of power. And so that's why it's really hard to dismantle because like we are then taught, I think it happens everywhere, but like we are then taught that our biggest enemies are those who are the same.
Yeah.
They're pitting the weak against the weak, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we learn to be in competition with each other and we turn against each other and we start to compete for those very limited spots. And that's why you see a lot of internalized misogynism and a lot of like hate for, you know, racism too. And that makes me so sad. And that's what I hope can kind of break down in time.
So have you seen after you started your activism, things to really take a concrete change? Not just like symbolic change, not just people saying, yeah, we stand with women. Or,
there's been both. I think both. And even I have an amazing band and my band is white men. And it was really testing for them. But the whole time they were just like, we're behind you and you're doing the right thing and you go right ahead and do what you need to do. But they're there with me because like how me speaking up affects me, or it also has affected them. And, you know, they've said to me, wow, I just realized like the ceilings that are over your head and the injustices that you have to go through as a woman of color in a marginalized group and as a survivor who's speaking out and taking on that public toll, like the sacrifice you've had to take and how it has affected your career. I would not have ever seen any of that if I was just watching you like I was a friend. But because they're next to me and it, you know, they see everything, they're just like, oh my God, I didn't know it was so blatantly obvious like that.
So have your career been like substantially negatively affected because of this?
Oh yeah, of course.
People been canceling your
both,
shows?
Right? Yeah, it's both. I would say that I have gained a lot of support and I realize that there's a lot of great people in the world who stand beside me. And I think I am stronger for it because I speak on behalf of many survivors and we share our strength together. And I've been able to build some beautiful connections. But at the same time, I have disrupted power and the gatekeepers who decide who can come in and out, upset that I've spoken out. And so they don't want to program me or they don't want to have me part of like whatever it is because they're scared that I'm going to
be the activist.
Yeah, you know,
rather
flip
than
it
the
on
musician,
its head. Yeah,
right?
exactly. But the other side is that I'm now in this weird position where I can't be an artist. I get given spots to be the advocate. So like recently I did a conference talk, like a keynote. I don't know if you know keynote. Yeah. Normally musicians who do keynotes, musicians who've had really successful careers and they're at the end of their careers and people know all of their work and they want to hear their life story. I got a keynote because I made a lot of advocating. Like I did a lot of advocacy and created a lot of change, not because of my work as an artist. And so I said to them, I'm happy to do this because it's important to me, but you also need to give me a moment for my music. You can't just use me so that your company looks good. Yeah. Like you checked it off like, oh, we programmed this person. So of course we care about women and marginalized groups and their safety and we stand against abuse because she spoke for us. But I was like, well, what are you actually going to do about it as an organization who's had stories pitted against them and they were complicit in those situations? As well as that, because I'm doing this for you, how are you going to platform me as an artist. And they completely failed me. Like they promised me all these things and just completely failed me. And I was absolutely furious. And so the problem still goes on. And that's because people don't understand quite like the gravity of how those situations come about. So it comes back to that one student, you know, that you kind of like faced against. We're constantly having to meet this like dead ends, and it's so hard to understand. And when this organization really like failed me, I've been working with the government for the last 4 months to write up some new like policies.
Wow.
It's been a lot of work, and this policy will come out at the end of the month.
So you're writing actual bills.
Well, I'm not, but like I'm just...
But you can make that into like, new music. There's the lyrics already written.
Yeah.
Those are my lyrics.
I don't know if people want to listen to those lyrics.
With your voice, they will. Yeah. Yeah. With your voice, they will. Yeah.
But there was this one meeting with a lot of powerful people in the room. Everyone was a CEO or director. I was the only artist. And the head of this organization who failed me came right up to me and said, I think I'm the only person in this room who owes you an apology. And I was like, fuck yeah, you owe me an apology.
So
like
that
you
person
can't even
did?
laugh. Yeah, he apologized to me, but I was like, don't just apologize to me.
Yeah, you have to do something, right?
Yeah, I was like, because there's tension and you're scared of me. Actually, what are you going to do about it? And do you actually understand what you did in that, like with your power and how you failed as a leader of that organization to people who are marginalized and that you've just used for your own performative actions? And I just gave him a lecture for like 15 minutes.
Wow.
Just like...
That's
Also, you should charge them for the lecture.
I mean, it's really complicated and it's really difficult, but I think that's why I came to music and art in the first place, was to make sense of something that was really hard to articulate, to communicate. And I think because I had a lot of trauma in my life, like I actually first studied to be an engineer, and then I did my bachelor.
Wow.
And did marketing, and then became a business analyst in a software development firm. And my family's all like, yay, engineer, like that kind of stuff.
I don't think you when you decided to become a musician, were they happy?
Oh, no. No.
So you're an analyst, and then what happened?
Because I had a lot of trauma in my life. I think that's the main reason. Like my best friend, one of my closest friends, passed away when I was 18. And I think that was the last straw for me. But it took me a while. But what happened was I was walking home and I passed a garage sale and I decided to buy a guitar. I don't know how to play the guitar. And I just like, instead of learning how to play the guitar, I started writing songs. They were really terrible songs. It's not like I became like it wasn't amazing.
So were they on your SoundHound or YouTube, your early work?
No, I hope they never appear.
See the light of the day.
Yeah, exactly. It was so bad, but that process of creating, it gave me this like, whoa, like this outlet. And it helped, you know, kind of make sense of the things, because I didn't have a support network around me then. And the way my family deals with trauma is...
Bury it.
Yeah, bury it. Yeah, it just swallow it and keep it inside. But what was happening is because I had a whole life of trauma, that thing I was keeping inside of me, it was slowly killing me, because it was just like poison inside of my body that was slowly affecting me. And music for me allowed me to just like take a piece of it and put it outside, you know, put it in like a vessel and let that exist on its own. So I felt lighter for it. And so I started falling in love with the process of creating. So I did it more and more. And it gave me like more courage to do it, like take more poison out of my body. So I just started doing this as like a bit of a hobby. And then I said to myself, because my close friend passed away and he was really creative. He was an artist. He was a filmmaker. He was just a drawer. He was just amazing, and a poet. And he left behind so much beautiful work. Even though he's not on this earth anymore, there is so much presence still of him left behind. And I looked at my life and I was like, if I died tomorrow, I'd never existed. And I didn't do anything important with my life. Like I studied hard and I was really academic and I achieved in that sense, but really it did nothing. So I said to myself that I wanted to like record these songs and just like have the experience of performing live, because I remember him telling me that like I'm not living life passionately, that I was just living life in the way that society expects of me. I never understood that until he passed away. And then I performed live for the first time and I thought I was just going to do it once. But I fell in love so much with that exchange of energy, that connection. I've never experienced that connection before. And I knew then that I had to change my life and that I wanted to be a musician and an artist.
From the day you picked up that old guitar to the day you did your first live performance, so how, like, what kind of time frame?
Yeah, not long. Probably like 8 months.
Well, that's fast.
Yeah.
That's pretty fast.
Yeah, but I didn't just like quit my job and like, you know, I was still
8 months.
logical and smart. Yeah. So what I did was I worked part-time as a business analyst, and then I knew that I was coming into the music industry really late, and I've never had anything just like given to me, and I don't have money and I don't have connections. So I knew that I was going to have to learn everything myself. So I worked part-time as a business analyst, so I wasn't just taking full risk. And then the other time I started interning. I was way overqualified for this intern job, but it was in the music industry. And so from there, I quickly went up through like sales department, marketing department, music department, licensing department, then got like a management position. And I just like was quick about making connections and learning how the music industry worked, how people managed their own like music careers. And then after I did that for a while, I was like, at some point I'm going to have to take the plunge. So I quit my business analyst job and worked in the music industry and started my artist career. And that was my half-half. And then in 2018, I quit all of my work and went 100% into my music and art.
2018.
Yeah.
So that's just 4 years ago, five years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's what the 2018, that's when I started Jaguar Jonze.
Yeah, so when you decided that you're going to quit your day job, your half-time job as a business analyst and went into the music industry full-time, you know, did you have to like convince your parents or something like that?
Well, yes. When I wanted to become a musician, my family didn't talk to me for a while and didn't come to see a show of mine for 2 years.
Even your dad?
Oh, my dad's never been in my life.
I see.
That one is easy. He was actually probably the most supportive of my music career, and that's because he doesn't give a shit about my life. By not being there. Yeah, exactly.
Very supportive. Thank you, Dad.
I love your silence. Thank you.
Your mom was...
If we think about, I think a lot of Asian culture is like this. Our parents, I mean, my mum sacrificed so much to be able to be with me in Australia. I shouldn't have been in a position where I was able to get a tertiary education, let alone like a university education. I worked so hard. I, had scholarships and did so well in school, and I just decided to throw that away. I think what our parents want the most for us is to have security and social status.
Yes.
And that is by like having a house, a roof over your head, being able to put food on the table, and then, having a profession that reflects on success, what society's definition of success is. That could be a doctor, a lawyer, an engineer, like something like that. And to go from something like that to a musician where I didn't know where my next paycheck was coming from, there was a lot of shame. So I think it was just like many, many years of telling me I'm not good enough, that I was making a stupid decision, that I'm wasting my life, that I'm being selfish. Yeah, everything like that. So they were very disappointed in me. Not just my family, but the entire community around me. So it was really difficult. I think I've always been a stubborn person, and that's what led me to become the place I am at as a musician and also as an advocate. Is once I have my idea set on something, I work really hard to make it happen.
Very determined.
Yeah, very determined. I've always been very determined, and that's because I've come from nothing, and everything I've got is through determination and hard work. So that's the only way I know how to work. Even my friends recently, like I've been friends with them for over 10 years. He, like the other day, sat me down and said, I want to apologize to you because when you said you wanted to be a musician, I shamed you and I didn't believe in you and I told you that you were stupid, and everyone around you said the same thing, and now you're kind of like laughing at all of us because you've been able to get to this place where we never thought you could. And I wanted to say I'm sorry. Because I've always felt really guilty about that. And that meant a lot to me. But I also was like, that's okay. I didn't need your approval anyway. So,
yeah, that's true. So how did you manage to reconcile your relationship with your mom over this decision?
Yeah,
to not be an engineer, to not be a business person, to not make a lot of money.
Yeah, totally. I always understood where she was coming from as well. And I think I also acknowledged the trauma that she has gone through and the sacrifice she's had to make. And I wanted her to understand that I can still make her proud, just not in the way she wanted it to be written. And I can also still make a difference, just not in the way she imagined it to be. And I can build a sustainable and secure career. And I'm still on that journey. And I think through everything, even when I started doing the Me Too movement, again, my mum was really
I could imagine
scared.
She would try. Did she try to talk you out?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, definitely. She also just didn't understand what I was talking about. Like she just, there's another layer of like, how could that happen to my daughter? So there was a lot of denial. And, as a Taiwanese person, she's trained in denial and suppression.
Expertise.
Yeah, she's an expert in denial and suppression. So, she was like, you're putting so much risk out there, and like it's kind of like don't put your neck out to get chopped, that kind of feeling. So she was really against it, but even now she said, I'm really proud of you because when I wanted you to be an engineer or a doctor, like I wanted you to have positive impact on people's lives, and what you've done now, I still don't understand why or how you did it. She still feels like a bit weird about it, but she's like, but you've made more change than a doctor or an engineer, like if I was a doctor or an engineer could. So, yeah, I think she's proud of me.
Do you remember the first time she came to your show?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, so when
do I
did it
speak
happen?
the truth on this? Like this is, okay, so she came to my show. She sat right at the front. Stood right at the front in the middle, arms crossed, and just the whole time shaking her head, just like disapproving.
But she came on her own, right? Or
she came on her own
to disapprove
of you. Okay,
life. There's a life disapproval.
And then I came home, and I had this. I was still living with my mum at that time. I came home late because I celebrated with my friends afterwards, and I came home, and my mum usually 9 o'clock sleep. Right? I came home at 2 a.m. and her light in the bedroom was still on and the bedroom door was still open, and she's sitting in her bed, fully awake, staring at me, and she was like, I hated that show. And then she was like, you were out of pitch. You're not talented. You'll never make it. You wasted my time. Don't do this to yourself. Like, don't be a musician. Turn the light off, like, go to bed.
That is very dramatic.
Yeah, it was so dramatic.
She must have rehearsed.
Yeah. And
Typical.
Yeah. I feel like from 9 p.m. to like 2 a.m.
How
she's
do
like
I write my
training.
line? Right?
Yeah.
It's like, do I, what kind of face do I do?
How do I cause the most effect on my daughter so that she does not become a musician? And I remember feeling so hurt and heartbroken. Anyway, I'm used to her disapproval, so I just kept going. And she really did not like it. And eventually, when the fruits of my labor started bringing me returns, she started being like, oh, she started accepting this. And now she's actually very proud of me. And now I can tell you a different story. If she's at my shows, she's at the front, she's on the sides. She's obvious, like she's usually brought like a few people, like her hairdresser, like her, something like
her girlfriends.
Her mechanic, like, like all these people like, come look at my daughter. And then she'll be at the front with her iPhone, the whole time. But she won't say anything, like, as in she's not like, hi, she's not like that. She'll just like film everything. And then now, like, I live on my own, but when I see her the next time, she'll say, good show.
Wow.
Yeah. So this has been many, many, many years. Yeah. So she's accepted it. Yeah.
Because, my research is on actually family relationship, exactly on that, right? Family reconciliation.
Right.
Yeah. And because my topic was on accepting your child as an LGBTQ person.
Right.
But then, started out with the question of how do we make our parents accept who we are?
Yeah.
Then later it became a project of how two sides reconcile. And, the parents are hurt.
Yeah.
And the parents are trying. A lot of time they are fearful of rejection.
Yeah.
Right? Of my disapproval of my child. It's just amazing to hear your story about how...
Yeah.
And she's just dramatic.
Well,
I'll give her that.
I mean, I think my experience in this is like, because it was just basically like me and my mum. And she got her Australian citizenship when I was 14. And before then, she wasn't allowed to stay in Australia. And I lived in many different homes.
So she had to like fly back and forth?
Yeah, and also fight the court system for a really, really long time. It got to the point of like Supreme Court, and it was the last appeal. It was like, so our relationship is already so affected by the political system because when I was born in Japan, and when my parents divorced, my mum wanted to bring me back to Taiwan. But the Taiwan system is I can only get a citizenship through my dad's side. Huh? So my mum can't bring her own child.
Right.
That was back then, in the 90s.
Wait.
I don't think that was the case.
Even when I called this year, that's the first thing they said to me.
What?
And I said, your laws have changed now. And they're like, oh, let me go and have a look. And they're like, oh, it has changed.
That's why you had to move to Australia.
Yeah, because I was born Australian.
I see. Even though you were born in Japan.
Yeah, I don't get birthrights. Yeah.
Okay,
so my dad still lives in Japan, but he wants nothing to do with me.
I see.
So, he doesn't claim ownership of me. My mom tried to get me a Taiwanese citizenship, and it either had to come through your dad's side or get your dad's permission. My dad wanted nothing. So what my dad wanted was for me to go to just an orphanage and to not have any responsibility over me. So I got sent to Australia, and then it becomes my mum's fight to try to be with her child. So, and she's not allowed to be in Australia because she's not an Australian citizen.
Wow, talking about fucked up laws.
Yeah, it's fucked up. So I've spent my whole first half of my career in the court system trying to fight for my mum to be able to stay in.
So sometimes you were alone in Australia because your mom weren't there.
Well, unfortunately, the law
in the 90s.
Like in the 90s, you were applying the law from 1929. So it's like very old.
Yeah, as in they hadn't updated their system. Yeah,
they updated till like 2000, like
yes,
2000. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, it was the truth.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah,
that is wrong.
So it was 2000.
It was 2000.
Okay. That's totally. So I was in '98. I moved to Australia. Yeah. And okay, so I've always asked my mom, why can't I get my Taiwanese citizenship?
Yeah.
And she was like, she's really hurt because like in a place like that because most people, a divorce is enough.
Yeah.
And a shit husband is enough.
Yeah.
And then she was in this position where like even
losing
her
the
country,
children.
losing her children, and also her country wouldn't support her.
Yeah.
Like, what choice does she have?
That's really fucked up law.
Yeah.
You fall through all the cracks.
Yeah, fall through all the cracks.
Every single crack you can find.
Yeah. So even when she moved to Australia, she can't work there. You know, like it's just everything, it just falls through the cracks. So this trip I'm on now was like, because we're in this new place now and we've repaired a lot of our relationships, she's been able to kind of chip away at her trauma for a long period of time. I suddenly said, hey, Mum, I looked at the law. I think it's changed now and I can apply for my citizenship through my mother's bloodline now if I can get your papers while you're in Taiwan.
So and she's now here with you.
Yeah, and I sent her, she was like, no way. I tried so hard and they always said, it's only through your dad.
She didn't know it has changed.
Yeah, she didn't know. And she didn't believe me. So I sent her the link and she was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'll go get my papers. And when we go back to Australia, we'll apply for your Taiwanese citizenship. So
not here? So you're not applying?
Because you have to go through the embassy in Taiwan.
Australia.
Yeah.
You cannot do that here. You have to go somewhere
it's
outside Taiwan. That's very stupid.
It was so complicated because I had to get my papers, my mom's papers from Taiwan.
And then fly to Australia.
But I also have to get my birth certificate from Japan.
Oh.
Yeah.
And you have a temporary passport from Taiwan to get in.
Yeah, it gets so confusing.
So you have
really complicated.
So you have to enter Australia using your temporary Taiwanese passport?
Yes.
In order to
next time
re-enter Taiwan, saying you cannot use your Australian or like a foreign passport to get into Taiwan to apply for your citizenship.
Yeah.
This is way too complicated.
Very complicated.
My mum was so hurt, understandably. She was just like, why are you so desperate to get your Taiwanese citizenship? And I was like, because I was raised by you. I relate so much more to you than I do my father. And it's important for me to get it. Yeah.
I thought she'd be happy.
Yeah.
No, because there's so much pain.
Okay.
Yeah. It's so much more
process,
different.
Right?
Yeah, in the whole process. How much more simpler would it have been if when she divorced, she was able to fall back to the safety of her family in her country and bring back the children and raise her children in a place that's familiar and supportive.
And she has support, right?
Yeah. All my mum would say was like, they don't want divorce in our family's history kind of thing. So I was like, that's a whole other
trauma,
trauma. Yeah. I would say I spent most of my life alone. And what I like to call this period of my life where I'm doing what I want with my life because I was forced to grow up really quick. I call this period where I get to like create and explore and have the freedom in my music and art. It's my childhood that I never got. So I call this my childhood. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's really
all
complicated.
The fun you have.
Yeah. And like just, you know what, like the children, just like how they create in the world. It's just like there's no shame. There's no inhibitions. There's no like, society telling them to do what. You just get to create, right? And so I feel like I get to do that now.
So you are very, very resilient.
Yes. Very resilient. And also this is why I've never had to have anyone's approval because my survival has depended on my determination.
And that's why you could bring all these changes. Right? You can affect all these people because you are determined and you are trauma-informed, right?
Yeah,
you know what that is like.
The main thing is I was put through an unfair system and I had a really fucked up life. And that's because the system hurt me. And so when I was now in a position to do something about it as an adult, was I going to play a part in continuing that system or was I going to try my best to make sure that system doesn't hurt someone else like me? And that's what I chose.
Wow.
Yeah, I would regret my whole life if I decided to play the same game that hurt me in the first place.
Wow. Because earlier you were talking about enablers, right? People who knew there were problems but decided not to do anything about it, to play along, to benefit from that silence. And you decided not to be that enabler.
Not to be that. And so to go back to your thing, when my mum finally made it to be here with me, it was precious. But then expectation, everything is on me to make sure that I take care of myself and my mum and the community that helped protect us or raise us. And, you know, because we lived in absolute poverty, didn't even have we struggled to put the roof over our head, the food on the table, you know, all the things that
that's why she needed that so much from you.
Yes,
right? She wanted you not to suffer.
Yes. So it's not only for me, it's for her and everyone else who invested in us and, you know, helped us get out of this below the poverty line. So that expectation and pressure was a lot more than normal. So my life never felt like it was mine at all because I didn't choose to go to Australia. I didn't choose in any home I did end up living in. I never had choices. And then also this expectation for me to be successful and, you know, become whatever it is to be able to put food on the table. It was just chosen for me. And then doing something like music and art is the first time where I was this is something I want. But what that meant is because my relationship with my mum, it was so codependent because she moved to a country where she had no friends, no family, couldn't speak English. By that time, when I'm 14, I'm a teenager, I don't speak her language either. So I've tried really hard to try to practice Mandarin. That's where it comes from. You know, we just had this broken communication. So she depended a lot on me for her survival as well. And also because she absolutely sacrificed her whole life to be with me, there's also this other side where she blames me for the unfortunes of her life too. So there's this kind of unhealthy relationship. I say that me and my mum are really close now, but I've had to work really hard to get it to that place when we're talking about reconciliation. She refuses the idea of therapy, while therapy for me has absolutely changed my life. And I think I've had to do therapy for me, do a lot of hard work for myself, and do it for my mum. Because she doesn't want to take responsibility. She doesn't want to face her traumas at all. She just wants to bury and hide. So it was a lot of work, but because I love my mum, I wanted to make sure that we could try and get our relationship to a more healthy place. And what that meant was that I had to establish boundaries.
Boundaries.
The same old talk of boundaries, and be really strict about my boundaries and make sure that they weren't crossed, and change my system on how we were going to now function. So if I change my system, she has two choices. So she either doesn't follow the system and we fall apart and don't have a relationship, or she chooses to change her system to match mine and go to a new chapter in our relationship. And it took a really long time, but there was no way she was going to choose to not have a relationship with me. So she slowly changed her system to match mine. And now we're a lot more equal in our relationship.
It's almost parallel to whatever you're doing with this Me Too movement, right? You have your boundary. It was crossed. Totally. You're no, I'm not going to take it. I'm going to change the system. And y'all better follow along. Right?
I feel like I'm doing that this year too, again, with advocacy and artistry. I've made it quite clear that I've done as much as I can as an advocate, and the advocacy will always be important to me, and it will always be side by side with my artistry. But I need to prioritize my artistry now, because it's very unfair that a person who has had to work so hard in the from where I've come from, who came into the music industry to be an artist, I've then had to step back and do something else again.
Wow, so we started the show with a topic of talking about Me Too, and then realize all kinds of systems are fucked up. All different kinds of laws and systems and regulations.
I feel like it all matters.
Yeah.
Because what we're talking about is intergenerational trauma. And then that compounds the system that continues to hurt us. And someone has to break that cycle, right? But it's extremely hard to break that cycle. And, today I went to Jingmei White Terror Memorial Park.
Wow.
And my mum was like, why would you want to go to some place like that? And I was like, because it's important to learn the history to determine our future. And she's like, why? Like, why does it affect you? You don't live here. Or that it doesn't affect you at all. We have no control. It's all up to the government. And I was like, that's the thinking that got that to this place in the first place. Yeah. And I was like, are you going to say that about what I've done with the Me Too movement? Because it requires people to fight to make a change. And I think taking her there, it slowly cut down her barriers too. Because it's the period she grew up in Taiwan. Yeah. And in the beginning, she was like, I don't want to come here. Yeah. It's too much. And in the end, she was like, I can't believe I lived through that. And that was so messed up. And the taboos get broken down. Yeah. That shame gets broken down. And that's what's important. So we can just stop that repetition and that pattern of trauma just being enforced into new systems, into new industries, into new families, just needs to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. So, it just now is a lot that just happened, and then I am just entirely blown away by what you have.
I'm so sorry.
No, for what you have been through, right? It's one of whatever happened to you is already too much, and then one pile on another, and then now you're still sitting here, you're fighting on. It's just truly inspiring. I'm not just saying just for the sake of saying it.
Thank you. That means a lot. I just hope that by choosing to always stand up and, carry on, I can inspire someone else who's going through a similar thing to choose the same path. And I think it's important to feel these things.
This is clean.
This is clean. It's ripped tissue.
This is clean.
So when Jaguar came in, we had her sign on our little, what's that called? Our sign.
Yeah.
So she signed. The only other name on that board was our ex-vice president. The last time the ex-vice president was here, she cried. So she got to sign that board. So now you make me cry. So you could sign that board. So these are the board of who made our host cry.
So next time is Ting, is it?
Yeah.
Ting's turn to cry. No, but it means a lot that I think empathy is so important in a world that is so disconnected after the pandemic. We're so much more disconnected from each other, and I've witnessed empathy getting smaller and smaller because we're less attached with humanity. Right? Yeah, very disconnected. I think for me, the reason why I chose to do music and art is because it's a form of storytelling to remember each other, find connection and truth in humanity so that we don't let these systems get away from us, power take over us, governments to control us. I think it's important to remember each other. Yeah. And that the power that we have in each room and the privilege and the pain that gets thrown around.
Keeping quiet in the dark always was the hardest part. Felt like no.
So Zoe, you have to wrap up because I can't.
Well, thank you for having me.
Today we have a very amazing, strong, probably one of the strongest human, not just girl, but human ever met in my life. And she create amazing works, not just in music, but the activities or make the changes you made. That's amazing. I'm super glad we can have you here today.
This is a truly amazing episode. I'm so glad I came out of the house. It's just a cold day, and then I met this wonderful woman. And right, we started out talking about Me Too, but I think I want to remind everyone that Jaguar Jonze is a musician, and her music is amazing. Because, you know, I am not joking. Yesterday, I just, I'm interviewing this girl tomorrow. I better listen to her music. And I just, randomly tap on one of your music video, and just the first note, I was like, wow, that is really great. And I was hooked. I just had that song on repeat. Yeah, and I told my partners, I listened to this. I listened to her voice. That's just so beautiful and very, very therapeutic. Thank you for that. So we encourage everyone to listen to her music and to read her story and tell your stories.
Thank you. Thanks for having me and for letting me tell my story.
So that will be all. Bye.
再见.
Party's over. Get out. 开到张伟表。
Party's over. Get out.
太嘎张伟了。
嘿，你刚刚参加的是由鬼岛之音举办的 Z 色派对。
Party 主持人是张竹晴与李金奇，
制作是叶阿婷，
剪辑混音是小蔡，
监制是 Emily Y 吴怡慈。
喜欢跟我们一起 party 吗？那赶快推荐给你身边的朋友，下次一起狂欢！
别忘记要在你的 Podcast App 按下订阅或追踪，下次开趴的时候才不会变成边缘人哦。
假如你用的是 Apple Podcast， 那拜托给我们5星评分加留言。
如果你对今天的派对内容很有共鸣，疯狂点头，也欢迎你追踪鬼岛的 IG 与脸书，并留言给我们。有话大声说也是一种女力或男力的表现哦。
那我们下次派对见喽，拜拜，
拜。